SKOL Vikings, let's win this game.
Vikings fan, the vibe in Minnesota hits different today, I've got to admit. There is a game on deck that can really mess with a rival's life in the conference. On top of that, a key defensive piece just lost his spot, and that always sparks debate in the locker room. On offense, some new names are flashing, and there is already an eye on reinforcing the line for the future. And down the road, a big decision about who runs that huddle could shake this whole Vikings nation. It is absolutely worth sticking around until the end to understand what is coming. Now, before we dive into every detail of these stories, let me lock in a quick deal with you. If you like talking Vikings in a no-nonsense way, hit that subscribe button because it is free and it helps this channel a ton. Smash the like button too, that pushes the video out to more purple and gold fans. And at the end, I want to see your takedown in the comments. There are games that are more than just games, and this one against Dallas carries that kind of weight. It even gives you a little chill when you think about how this night could end. The truth is, both sides are under pressure, but in Minnesota it feels different. We know we have to win to keep breathing, even if it is just that tiny thread of hope that only people who truly live and breathe Vikings football understand. The other side looks desperate not to see their season fall apart, and that always turns the temperature up more than it should. What is wild is how the schedule seems stacked against everybody. If the Eagles take care of business earlier in the day, Jerry Jones's house turns into a pressure cooker even before kickoff. Add in the very real and honestly delicious chance to wreck their dream a little, and suddenly this matchup becomes bar talk, tailgate talk, and timeline talk for every Vikings fan scattered everywhere. And there is more. Their offense does not scare the way it once did. Their defense is leaking badly, especially against the pass. That opens the door for us to believe our young field general J.J. McCarthy can show more of his arm, his poise, and the processing that is still coming together. And to be honest with you, that gets me fired up. Out of nowhere you get that spark, like, hold on, if he strings together a couple of strong drives early, the whole energy of this game flips. Of course, the reality is brutal. The playoff path for Minnesota is basically science fiction at this point. It depends on stumble after stumble from half the conference. But you know what? When the odds are tiny, that is when this team loves to pull something crazy. We have seen it before. And the funniest part is that even if the big dream is out of reach, there is always that petty joy of making life miserable for people who have been looking down on this franchise for years. Dallas is squarely in that sight line, whether they like it or not. There is a big emotional side for this purple and gold crowd, too. Fans look at this game as a chance to send a message, to show that even while building for the future, this team can still punch back at anyone who calls themselves a giant. I have already heard fans say that just knocking down their morale for one night would make the whole thing worth it. Is it an exaggeration? Maybe. But Vikings Nation really feels that way, and I get it completely. One thing that gets to me is this. If the game starts with pressure on them and our offense clicking, that stadium can go quiet in a hurry. And when their crowd disappears, we know that the mood swings fast. That is where the danger lies for them, and the hope lives for us. Only here you get this kind of breakdown from someone who has followed this team through all the ugly years. Now tell me what you think about flipping their night upside down. I want to feel where you are on this, and stay locked in because the next story hits right at the heart of that locker room. Honestly, this situation in the secondary is starting to bother me in a different way. We spent years begging for stability at cornerback, and just when it looked like they had finally found an interesting piece, it all fell apart way too fast. Isaiah Rodgers arrived as that quiet steal, a big contract for a guy who had never really been a star, but with the hope he could lock down a starting job in Flores's aggressive system. And for the first few weeks, it actually felt like we might be onto something. There was that ridiculous game against Cincinnati that everyone remembers. 2 passes defended, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery, an interception, and 2 defensive touchdowns. It felt like we had finally found a guy who could own one side of the field and let the rest of the defense breathe. But the NFL is ruthless. After that peak, his production crashed. Over the next 10 games, there was basically nothing in terms of takeaways, almost no impact plays. The tape flipped fast, and that is where the internal criticism kicks in. It is not just about the ball in the air, it is the basics of tackling in space. Missed tackles, bad angles, ball carriers running through his attempts like it is a walkthrough. To be honest with you, that is brutal in a system built on trust and on everyone arriving in control at the ball. Flores is aggressive, but he does not forgive guys who do not finish plays. That is why Jay Ward started getting more run. He is not some guaranteed future All-Pro, not even close. But he brings something the coach clearly values: security in contact and fewer embarrassing whiffs in front of the fans. Ward is on the field more in base looks, while Rodgers has been bumped into more of a nickel role, coming in only in specific packages. For someone who was hyped as a major offseason swing, that is a very obvious step back. In fan language, he lost juice with the staff. And once you lose that, it usually feels like a countdown. Then there is the money piece. You absolutely cannot ignore a 2-year deal worth around $11 million for a guy who is no longer even a locked-in starter. That squeezes the cap and forces the front office to think ahead. Purple Faithful knows the deal. If you do not produce, the bar goes up. You turn into a candidate to be cut, traded, or replaced just to free up space. That is how this league works, especially for a team trying to rebuild a defense without blowing everything up. The one part that gives a little hope is the idea that Minnesota might go hard after a corner in the first round of the next draft. The hot name right now is Mansour Delane out of LSU. Physical, smart, aggressive at the catch point. He looks like a perfect Flores system fit. If that projection holds, it is a clear sign the team sees that position as a top-tier priority. The message to the current room is simple. If you are not playing on the edge every snap, someone else will take your spot. In the end, it hurts to see another corner bet wobble like this, but it also shows the franchise is done living off Band-Aids on the back end. And if the defense can finally settle things there, the next step has to be taking care of the guys who protect our quarterback. That takes us straight into the next story. There is one thing that has followed me through all these years watching the Vikings: offensive line drama. I have seen good quarterbacks take way too many hits because the middle of the line looked like an open highway. So when a promising center pops up in draft conversations, my radar turns on immediately. That is where Zarian McGill out of Colorado comes in, a low-profile name who might actually fit exactly what Minnesota needs. Over in Colorado, the season was total chaos. A record of 3 wins and 9 losses, cameras all over the head coach, sky-high expectations, and very little payoff. In the middle of that mess, McGill was one of the few steady, bright spots. He has logged more than 1,500 snaps across multiple programs. He has shown he can communicate, anchor against inside pressure, and avoid those silly mistakes that kill drives on third down. He is not a highlight reel star, but he is exactly the kind of offensive lineman coaches trust without overthinking it. He got to Boulder expected to help, but he delivered way more than that. He learned the offense quickly, picked up the scheme, synced with the rest of the line, and turned into a stabilizing presence. No need for swagger, just the guy who calls out protections, adjusts communication against blitz looks, and keeps the pocket clean for that one extra second. For a center, that is almost a luxury. Right now, the projection has him going on day 3 of the draft, somewhere between the 5th and 7th rounds. That is exactly the range where you hunt for hidden value, players who can contribute early without wrecking your cap. And to be honest with you, his profile fits perfectly with what we have been begging for. A stable presence in the middle who might never turn into an all-pro, but finally ends the feeling that every snap is a coin flip. Just think about what the center spot has been since John Sullivan left. We have seen big bets like Garrett Bradbury, plus veterans like Ryan Kelly now, and the same question keeps coming back. Can you truly trust it? The fan base is tired of that storyline. Anyone who really lives and breathes Vikings football knows how many good drives have died because pressure blew up the pocket right up the gut. Plugging a guy like McGill into this group would make a lot of sense. He would walk into one of the best tackle duos in the league. You have Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill on the edges, with solid pieces inside like Will Fries and Donovan Jackson. He would enter a structured room with zero expectation to be a savior on day 1. He could fight for a spot, rotate in, earn confidence step by step, and maybe grow into a medium-term answer. Of course, there are no guarantees. Drafting offensive linemen late is always a gamble, but it is the kind of swing that screams planning. Protect the quarterback of the future, fortify the interior, and build an offense ready to survive the hits when the schedule gets nasty in December and January. Drop your thoughts in the comments if you would be on board with seeing McGill come in to battle for that center job. And since we are already talking about schedule and survival, the next story is all about the wild math this team needs just to keep breathing in the fight. Look, this Vikings playoff math is one of those things you stare at and think, there is no way this is actually still alive. It is pure miracle territory. But as long as the league has not officially crossed our name off the board, fans are doing the calculations and hanging on to that tiny shred of belief. I am riding that train too, I am not going to lie. For that stubborn hope to make it through the weekend, 3 things have to happen on Sunday. First, in the early window, Cleveland has to go into Chicago and pull an upset. The Bears are sitting up top in the division with a strong record. They are at home with the cold smacking everyone in the face. On the other sideline, you have a team with 3 wins and way more questions than answers. That is a massive underdog spot. But they do have a dangerous quarterback. They have Myles Garrett chasing a record, and every now and then the NFL gives you upsets nobody saw coming. If the Bears win that one and get to 10 victories, it is over. That is it. The door slams shut on us. The whole plan hinges on matching their final record at 9 wins and 8 losses and trying to sneak past them on a divisional tiebreak. It sounds like a boring math class, but that is all Defend the North has left at this point in the season. We turn into schedule nerds whether we like it or not. If that first domino falls our way, all eyes shift to the late afternoon when the Rams host the Lions. The mission there is simple. Los Angeles has to hold serve at the top and hand Detroit another loss. The reason is straightforward. For Minnesota to dream about the 7th seed, the Lions can only win one more game the rest of the way. And to make it even wilder, that one win would need to be against the Bears in Week 18. It is like the script was written specifically to test the heart of anyone who really lives and breathes Vikings football. The good news, if you can call it that, is that the Rams absolutely have the firepower for this. They are at home, with a veteran quarterback and an offense that can roll. Detroit is up and down. Some weeks they look ready to run with the elite. Others they cough games away. So it is not crazy to imagine that result. But then you get to the part that really twists your stomach. The third and final step. At night, under the lights, it all swings back to us. We have to walk into Dallas's house and win. No ties. No moral victories. It is win or turn off the calculator for good. On the other side, you have a team with major defensive issues, but an offense that can light up the scoreboard in a hurry. The difference now is that they are under heavy pressure too, because this game can pretty much snap their season in half. And to be honest with you, that is exactly where that crazy opportunity lives that Vikings Nation loves to grab, turning into the annoying spoiler against a supposed favorite in a big-time spot. When you stack those 3 results together, a Browns win, a Rams win, and a Vikings win, the betting markets basically give it something like around 6% odds. In other words, almost nothing. But almost nothing is still not zero. And only here do we break down this insane roadmap with that stubborn stands and bleachers mentality, hanging on to whatever hope is left. Because if by some miracle this team makes it out of the weekend alive, the next question gets even heavier. Who is going to carry this offense and turn that extra life into something real? That is exactly what the next story puts on the table. There is a delicate piece in this final stretch that hits the future of the offense head-on. The quarterback conversation just never stops, and J.J. McCarthy's name sits right in the middle of it. After a shaky start full of criticism over mechanics and pocket presence, every rumor about a veteran reinforcement feels bigger, and the name that has circled back is Daniel Jones. He finished last season here as a backup, getting a real feel for Kevin O'Connell's system. A lot of people inside and outside the fan base looked at that and thought, if the rookie struggles, bring Jones back and let him steady the ship. His run in Indianapolis looked like it was headed toward a longer-term deal, but the Achilles injury at the end of the year changed everything. Now the word is he is going to spend a big chunk of the 2026 season still working his way back, with no guarantee he is ready by opening week. That means that even if there is a reunion in Minnesota, it would almost certainly be more of a mid-season reinforcement than a day-one starter-type move. To be honest with you, that totally changes how JJ has to see his spot on this team. On one hand, it removes the immediate threat of a fully healthy veteran breathing down his neck in September. On the other, it sends a very clear message. If he stalls again next season, they can bring in someone who already knows the playbook, already knows the locker room, and can grab the wheel if things go sideways. It is not about losing the job in week 1. It is about a shadow creeping in around November. The good part is that JJ has already started to answer on the field. Against Washington, he delivered the best game of his career so far. 3 touchdown passes, a sky-high rating, and an offense that finally looked calmer. A lot of that came from a shift in O'Connell's approach. Instead of loading his head with adjustments, complex reads, and footwork corrections, the coach went the other way. Simplify. Stop worrying about what every defender might try to jump. Focus on finding the positive outcome baked into each play. It sounds basic, but for a cerebral quarterback, sometimes that is exactly what unlocks the game. And the test against Dallas now is massive. Their defense gives up way too many points, but Dak Prescott and that offense never stop scoring. JJ is going to need long, sustained drives, converted third downs, and consistent rhythm. Big plays alone will not cut it. The Vikings defense can help, but this is the kind of matchup that stamps a narrative on a quarterback. If he backs up that Washington game with another clean performance and steals a win on the road, he buys himself a lot of room to keep that starting spot without constantly looking over his shoulder. In the end, this bad news is not just about the risk of a Daniel Jones reunion down the line. It is the reminder that the NFL does not wait for anyone. Either you grow fast and prove you are the answer, or the franchise starts scanning the horizon. And it is from all of that weight, stacked on top of everything we have talked about today, that the bigger conversation is born about where this team really is and where it can go next. Man, after all of this, I end up exhausted and fired up at the same time with this team. We are talking about a game that can wreck a rival's dream, a secondary wobbling again. We are also talking about a possible new center to steady the line, about crazy playoff math just to stay alive, and about a young quarterback being tested on every single snap. Deep down, it all comes back to the same question. Is this group finally going to grow together? Or are we about to relive the same old ghosts? I'm still believing, stubborn as ever. Drop a comment. This space belongs to everyone who lives and breathes Vikings football. Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go.